Well, welcome everybody to another SERMAPod episode. This is the podcast for sports and entertainment risk management alliances. My name is Shalom. I am a board member of SERMA. I am your host. I also help lead our sports and entertainment division at USI. And we're talking about a really special topic today, and one thing that every festival goer and artist fears more than probably a bad sound check, and that's a dreaded canceled show. And if you think about all the communication aspects that is tied to that. But before we get to that, just a quick shout out and plug to all our listeners. We're very grateful for your support. And if this is your first time tuning in, a warm welcome to you. We've got some special guests joining us on our show today. Subject matter experts in their space, in their fields. A lot of great insights to come. So before we get into that, Roger, JR, Caleb, welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your day today. So why don't we start with some quick introductions? Tell us about yourself, what you guys do, and then we'll take it from there. Roger, why don't you go ahead first?
Sure. I'm Roger Sandau from Epic Insurance Brokers. I work in our specialty division that focuses on sports and entertainment risks. My particular specialty is on what we would call contingency insurance. So it would encompass coverage lines of non-appearance, event cancellation, terrorism, political risk. And our client focus is in the realm of touring entertainers and music festivals.
That's awesome. Quite the specialties, especially given the topic today. JR?
Yep. So my name is JR Justice. I'm with Take One Insurance, and we cover essentially all things entertainment. So everything's ranging from production companies to your event planners and those who do staging and rigging. So the things that you would see Roger covering, we might have a hand in as well. And then of course special event coverage, which kind of ties into what we're talking about today. So
That's awesome. Caleb?
Excellent. Yeah. Caleb Heckley, Take One Insurance. I'm the practice leader, and JR did a great job. Glad to be here.
That's awesome. Well, let's dive straight into it. I mean, our title for the show today is Country Roads, Closed Shows, Weather Chaos, and Concert Insurance. Pretty cheesy, but I think it fits right into some of the events that have happened in the last, call it, week or two. I mean, it's been a rough week if you're a country fan. Stagecoach evacuated, abruptly and postponed from, even that Saturday due to high winds, and festival grounds even deemed unsafe, right? And then you had Zach Bryan canceled his first show ever in Oklahoma. So why don't we start, Roger? I mean, the goal is to give our listeners a bit of insight, right? There's what you see on the media. But if we're to give our listeners some inside baseball, quote unquote, insurance can be the real power play in these cases, right behind the scenes to some of these decisions that operators and facilitators of these large festivals have to consider. Walk us through what are some of the considerations just ahead of time, just from a preparedness standpoint, right? And we'll get into the insurance elements of it here in a second. But before we get that, as an operator for these large events, what goes into it, Roger?
Yeah, so I would start with the premise that no artist or promoter wants to cancel a show.
Yeah.
And so if you see a cancellation occur, it's only after extraordinary efforts to try to mitigate the circumstances and get the show going. But sometimes Mother Nature doesn't cooperate, and it becomes an issue of safety either for the performer or for the fans. In preparation for an artist or a promoter who's undertaking to present an outdoor concert, they would do several things to make sure that they are prepared to react in case of adverse weather. The first would be to engage the services of a outside meteorological company that can provide not only weather forecasting, but also interpretation of that forecast. And I think that's key because the live event industry historically had relied on very limited weather data. In fact, most of it was Doppler radar showing where rain was falling. But there wasn't an understanding of how fast systems were moving, what direction systems were moving.
Mm-hmm.
And the industry really changed after the Indiana State Fair stage collapse,
Mm-hmm.
which was um, contributing result to that was that there was a large wind shear in front of a rain front. And the organizers of that event thought that they had some time before the rain was going to reach the site, not knowing that there was a wind shear an hour in front of it that ended up tearing that stage down and causing
Yeah.
some real harm to people. And so that was a wake up call, I think, for organizers and for performers, that having both better weather information
Mm-hmm.
and also a weather action plan was going to be essential. And so, from a risk management standpoint, making sure that you have access to quality weather data,
Mm-hmm.
and preferably that you have access to a meteorologist to, as I had said, interpret that weather data for you.
Right.
The second is to have a written plan in place that has been rehearsed before the doors ever open to the patrons. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of organizers will do tabletop exercises as to what do we do if there is a tornado, or what do we do if there's high wind or hail or lightning in the area.
Mm-hmm.
And those plans will specify particular parameters of action steps that need to happen. So in the case of wind, they will have action steps at 20 or 25 miles an hour, escalating action steps at 30 miles an hour and upward from there. That will ultimately, at a wind speed, lead to
Mm-hmm.
evacuation or a closure of the event. Same for lightning. People will designate a radius that if lightning is recorded as a strike within their radius, then they automatically move into preventative steps or evacuation steps at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the most important thing from an operational standpoint is to know that you have quality data and
Mm-hmm.
to know that you have a quality structured plan of
Mm-hmm.
action that will go into effect as soon as any of those triggers are reached. So
That's awesome. Sounds like from adverse weather, we'll call it, being a trigger, right, with high wind speeds and lightnings and whatnot, and then the evolution of weather detection technology, right, to help these operators, right, I guess best plan and forecast to the best that they can. Jr. Caleb, give our listeners that are not quite familiar with just the insurance elements to this, like, how early do they have to place these? Like, if a festival is this weekend, like, when's the drop dead deadline? I mean, I think about the technology that's around it. Like, how far can they forecast for these like weathers, right? Because if I'm an operator and I'm running these large festivals, like, how do you best plan? Roger mentioned that the planning element of it, there's a lot that goes into it. I'm sure this is one, if not Roger's, it's out there in the top three of considerations at least. Jared, Caleb, can one of you guys speak a little bit more about just the planning and the insurance element to that? Like, when's the drop deadline that you got to place such insurance, before sort of the unknown kicks into effect, which, obviously transpired over these last two events.
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, these carriers don't want to be adversely selected against, right? So it's like, hey, we got something coming up this weekend, forecast 10 days out, looks like this. So typically we see, within a couple weeks prior to an event, is usually that drop dead date. Different carriers are different in terms of what they do, but I think that's kind of an industry standard. But especially from an underwriting standpoint, right? You can't predict, months in advance what the weather is going to look like. And so some of the markets that, we work with and have access to, they've invested heavily in historical data and those tools of, hey, were we expecting the 100-year flood? Is that going to happen, this year? And so that's a lot of, you're trying to take that data and have an understanding. I would even think in my conversations with some of our underwriters, there wasn't really that big of a thing even a handful of years ago. And we're seeing weather patterns change a lot. Convective storms being a big issue as well, and just not being able to really predict that far out. But trying to use just insurance in general, right? Prior performance is a predictor of what's going to happen in the future, and so trying to be strategic with what that looks like. But really trying to understand and with what Roger plays in and versus where we're at, our clientele is going to be those kind of smaller retail agents where it's like, hey, we've got the local festival and we're the broker for the city, right, or the county, and we're going to come in and do some of that stuff. So we're not playing on the stage that Roger is in that way. So for us to be able to come and help educate these retailers about, hey, here's what you're going to need to do and see. Here are some of those questions. That's more of the role that we're taking in respects to take one and making sure that they're covered the way that they need to be and understand those coverage triggers.
Speaking of coverage triggers, Roger, you mentioned a little bit about wind speeds. Obviously, Stagecoach faced a bit of that, right, with the evacuation. What wind speeds do underwriters contemplate, like before the evacuation kicks in? Is there a certain number? What insights can you give to our listeners?
Yeah. So as I said, it's sort of a tiered approach. And as winds approach 20 to 25 mile an hour, and
Yeah.
you've got both sustained wind and wind gust. So both of those are factors in the determination. But at 20 to 25 mile an hour, you'll start to see temporary structures that are sidewalls are brought up. You'll see speaker stacks brought down to the stage level and secured. And so the site begins to become prepared for winds at that speed.
Right.
As you get to 30, 35 mile an hour winds, depending on the site you're on and how much temporary build you have, that may be enough to get people to start stepping back from stages. And that certainly happened at Stagecoach. There were video notifications of people to stand back from the main stage. And as you start to see something above 40 miles an hour, you're really looking to get people to safety and to shelter.
Yeah, that's a good point, Roger. So one of the words that come to mind is duty of care, right? As a festival operator, you think about they toe the fine line, right? Obviously, safety is paramount, but there is, you mentioned earlier that, it's not every artist's intention to cancel the show, right? Obviously, we saw it with Zach. I mean, he was very disappointing he had to cancel. And we'll get to that here in a second. But what are some of the other common risks and legal, I guess, considerations, for lack of better words, should they think about, like, if they ignore some of these warning signs, right? I'm thinking negligence in this case. What are some other insurance coverages that could come into play or ramifications if they, I guess, go over the edge and don't cancel as a result?
Yeah. So you really start to drift out of the cancellation considerations into the liability considerations.
That's right.
And, you may have a desire to move forward with the show and say, the lightning's only 3 miles away. I think we can do it. And then all of a sudden the lightning, strikes the site and injures multiple people. And now you have a liability claim. And so in all of these decisions, the safety of the artist, the safety of the patrons is paramount.
That's right.
And so that safety consideration is going to drive the decisions. I would also say that most of these decisions are made in a coordinated and collaborative fashion. There's multiple stakeholders. So there may be the event promoter. It might be the fire marshal. It might be the venue manager. It might be the artist manager. Are all voicing their view on whether the show can go on safely, because all of these stakeholders view it from a different standpoint.
Yeah.
In large cities, you have an office of emergency management. You have the mayor's office oftentimes that will get involved. And so once a decision is made to either evacuate or shut down an event for the day, it really is the product of multiple points of view that are converging into a shared decision.
Yeah. I can see the frustration. I'm just coming at it from a frustration from a festival goer standpoint. I save up all my money because that's my favorite artist from the show I was looking forward to, right, in the year. And then what they don't know is all these risks and decisions and large, thoughtful decisions that are made behind the scenes, right, Roger? So you bring up a good point there. JR, anything to add just from like the liability standpoint? I mean, Roger talked about this now just into away from the event cancellation into arguably something a little bit more, can be larger than what it is.
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously the event cancellation is what stands out the most, but, where we sit is with those who are setting up those stages and, who's making sure that safety is in place, based off the rigging. Like, are the trusses okay? And, just making sure from a technological standpoint that everything is sound. And, if those winds reach a high level of 50, 60 miles an hour. And, thankfully they responded quickly, but let's say they didn't. And now we're dealing with the stage coming down, and, you're dealing with the artist's injuries, you're dealing with the attendees and their injuries. So, it's really all encompassing. And I would say that, I'm sure Roger has had to see this, but all the coverage will align with each other to ensure that everyone is protected. So I think this Stagecoach event was such a great example of, the due diligence that is being done in the background. As you would think that this would be a full cancellation, but it really kind of responded as a partial disruption, and so fortunately, I would say both the carriers are happy because they don't have to pay out full artist guarantees, right? And so are the attendees, as they'll take an hour delay versus a canceled show. So
Yeah, nice, good points. I mean, speaking of full cancellation, let's shift gears over to Zach Bryan. I mean, first ever cancellation in Oklahoma, Tulsa, actually. But what I thought was funny actually was just, gosh, I'll say it here, the Karen controversies around, conversation exchanges between Zach and his fans, right? Obviously, he was pretty disappointed that he had to, you know, cancel his first show. But as you mentioned, Roger, a lot of these are out of the artist's control, right? There's a lot of due diligence that go into these big decisions, and the implications that are tied to it, especially from a safety on both the artists and also the fans. But if I'm a fan and I'm thinking about, was there a full refund tied to that because of such? Am I tying that together, Roger? Full refunds for a show before they even take the stage versus the partial, which you had mentioned, Jr. How does the ticketing work, and what do I guess festival goers know going into, like, is there a buyout purchase on a refund when they purchase their ticket? Is that how it works? Roger, what can you speak on that at all?
Yeah, so I'll speak to fan frustration because fans oftentimes look at the weather when a cancellation decision is made and say, "Well, I would have stood here and I would have, watched this. Why are they
Right.
canceling?" We had a large festival that was evacuated under blue skies, but the weather forecast, and we knew a system was coming in.
Mm,
So the messaging to all the fans was, adverse weather is coming. For your safety, please go to the exits. And people didn't move at all, right?
mm,
They didn't realize it. But 15 minutes later, the skies were dark. It was like
right.
nighttime, and a huge storm came in. So if a promoter is saying to a fan, you need to evacuate, you need to go seek shelter, it's being communicated because of a very good reason that
Hmm.
might not be apparent to the fan at that particular point, right? But especially if you look out and you think, well, it's not that bad, right?
Yeah.
So
Add alcohol to that, it's a tall order.
yeah, yeah, and, especially for somebody who's spent 3 hours, if it's a
Yeah,
general admission, they're
yeah,
they're at the barricade, they have their spot, they
right.
think like, "Why is this happening?" But it really is, a decision that is, been made by many. It's a very thoughtful decision for their
Mm,
safety, and so in terms of refunds, if an entire event doesn't take place, and so say take Zach Bryan on the first of the 2 Tulsa shows, then fans are, would seek a refund at point of purchase, or there's an automatic refund process to their credit card. And that's a pretty seamless process.
Yeah, and I think they did announce, Zach Bryan's team did announce automatic refunds for the Tulsa show. So yeah, that checks out.
Yeah. In terms of, the more challenging ones are where there's an interruption or there's an early closure. And that really becomes a decision on the part of the event organizer. Was there enough of the scheduled performance that was completed to warrant, no refund or a partial refund or what have you? But that's really a very fact specific circumstance.
Yeah,
And depending on what performers were able to take the stage and who wasn't able to take the stage.
that's right.
So,
Yeah, especially if it's, for those fans, not just the ticket refund, but the travel, right? And I guess there's elements to the purchasing of the ticket that they got to pay close attention to. JR, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I come from a property background, so seeing the rates in Oklahoma and just dealing with wind hail coverage there. For those in Oklahoma specifically, it's tough, because they run into these type of risks all the time. Which then from our standpoint is, I don't want to say it's good, but we have so much data that allows us to properly prepare and be sure that they have the best plan in place. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, look, last one for each of you. We'll go around the horn, but let's call this, the key takeaways, right? Like, sounds like the weather always wins. Insurance always wins in the end. But if you're a headliner and you're a fan in the front row, what do these adverse weather elements and these cancellation, what does that mean for just the market for event cancellation? Caleb, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think there's, we see a lot of capacity out of London. We're seeing more and more U.S. based markets with this, and they've all got similarities and also their unique flavor on what they're willing to do. There's some that are out there where if it's a partial cancellation of a show, hey, we've got curtailment coverage, right? It almost acts similar to like business interruption in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so it's really understanding what are you purchasing. But from our standpoint, and in terms of stuff we're dealing with, there isn't a lack of capacity that we're seeing from a market standpoint. Really what we try to do is understand, all right, what kind of show you got going on? Are we talking about big national acts or is it more regional type stuff?
Yeah.
And then trying to tailor an application and a policy based off that. And understanding, okay, who's promoting it, who's setting up the event, what does ingress, egress look like? Similar to what you hear in real estate, location. For us, it's contract, right? Like what does that look like? What's the risk transfer, mutual indemnity? Really getting into the nitty gritty of that is the biggest thing that we see in the value that JR and I look to provide to these retailers that may not have as much experience as somebody like Roger does, right? Like, hey, this is all we do. We're working with those more generalist type agents, and so that's what we try to bring to the table.
Roger, for the markets out there, obviously Caleb gave us a little bit of an insight. How much does location matter if I'm a festival operator, especially with some of these recent events? How much will my premiums be affected in the future, given, sort of the frequency of these, especially in the last 2 weeks?
It used to be the case that location was the main driver of the pricing.
Right.
And what we have found is the previously considered safe locations, Las Vegas, Southern California. 2 years ago, we had what was the equivalent of a hurricane hit Southern California and an event canceled, right?
That's right.
So we've had events in Las Vegas that have canceled due to very high winds, and Las Vegas was deemed safe. And then we had, events in Orlando and Miami that went forward. So location is still a consideration.
Yeah.
But I think, as JR and Caleb have said, the weather patterns are changing, and the 100-year model is not as reliable as maybe it was 10 or 20 years ago. So I think, along with the location, the quality and experience of the operator is a key underwriting consideration, because
Cool.
if you look at Stagecoach, what maybe a more inexperienced operator would have just canceled and said, the circumstances warrant a cancellation, thank you, go home.
Yeah.
Because of the thoughtful planning and experience of the Stagecoach promoter, they were able to turn that into an hour and 15-minute, hour and a half interruption, messaging to the patrons, hey, you're going to be coming back in. And they turned what could have been a cancellation into an interruption. And so I would say, for anyone who's organizing an event, really look around and understand what the best practices are. How can you create a structure of the best risk mitigation possible, and then relay that and communicate that to the underwriter, that, hey, our event, we're subject to weather like, a baseball game or a football game or a concert. But these are all of the steps that we have put into place to mitigate a loss. And I think that goes a long ways in what the pricing ultimately will be.
That's awesome. Well, look, we got to wrap this up. We'll end with something really fun. Favorite country artist? Is you guys Zach Bryan fans? Favorite song? I'm gonna go with the classic "Remember Everything" and Oklahoma Smoke Show. I would have loved to have seen that live. But Roger, any favorites?
I got to go back to the classic. I mean, George Strait.
Yeah, there you go.
That's probably where my heart lies. So,
Caleb, JR?
I gotta go classic country as well. So nothing in particular, but I'll just take the 90s. How about that?
There you go.
I'm going new school. I have to shout out Midland. Being from, was in DFW for half my life, so Midlands are, I think, our closest country band. So I'm gonna give them a good shout out. And then, of course, everyone 30 and below loves Morgan Wallen. So everyone should have a song of his in their podcast or in their playlist. So
that's awesome. Well, listen, thank you guys for taking the time out and sharing your industry expertise. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. That's all we have time for today, and we'll see you on the next SERMAPod.